different from being in Cambodia?
I think it feels like the system in Cambodia, the educational system is more standardized and more formal, while American one is informal and more personal, I guess, which is better and bad, sometimes, but not necessarily which one is better than which one. So back in Cambodia, when I was a student, the word assess standardized is usually by the final exam. We would have just one test that 100 of students would just take the same exam for the final and midterm one, which turned out to be the big part that determined the overall score. But here, right now, in America, I think things are kind of really different, because the teacher will just design their own test, just specifically just for one class, not necessarily for the whole class. And what they're looking more is they're not really necessarily looking at the score of your written test. So the final, they do have the final exam and have the midterm exam, but they still, like, I saw a couple of my classmates who did very poorly on the written test, but they could still pass the class because they did show in the classroom that they're competent and they understand what was taught in the classroom. So that's why I say this is part of the soft skill in the North American academic life.
So, are you saying that because you're an instructor at IFL, if you have a student in your class who has done a good job, is competent, but still clearly fails the final exam, most likely they're going to fail the class?
I think that might be the case, yeah. Because our system is formal, so we couldn't actually override this scoring program.
So what does that actually mean in the classroom at Arizona State? What are you expected to do?
I think from the teacher perspective, they don't normally expect you to be too critical about anything they say, that would be too weird. But if you can actually criticize teacher idea or anything in the book, the author idea, the teacher will just appreciate that. And I think that probably, to my opinion, is they are forming part of the part that show that you are more competent in the classroom, that you can evaluate the idea of the author and the teacher, him or herself. And in terms of classmate interaction, I think it's also necessary when your friend says something, that you need to evaluate the idea, see what's going on. Don't just believe them all the time. That they also what I appreciate them. If you just, they don't like the yes man, I guess, in the classroom and the discussion. Yeah, they don't like the yes man in the discussion. So you can actually challenge the idea all the time, Well, all the time is too extreme, but most of the time, I think that'd be very good. That would be a fruitful discussion. And I think what most, like me and other international students, find it hard is we trying to be polite in terms of when we try to challenge other people's ideas. That we just go indirect about what we're trying to say. That sometimes my teacher and my classmate would just have to actually restate my opinion just to get my point.
Okay, let's go back to that. So you're saying that for a lot of for you and other international students, that your style of
speaking
might be a little too indirect.
Yeah, too indirect.
So does that mean that Americans and Canadians don't understand your point?
Well, they kind of understand, but they kind of try to find what is your real point, They get your message, but they just want to find what's your big point, what's your main point.
So how do you think your professors respond to that then?
Well, sometimes they actually have to end up, after a long, speaking, they have to end up and restating, okay, so this is the question you want to ask, is it right or wrong? Yeah.
Well, that sounds like it would weaken it through the perspective of an American or Canadian. That would weaken your argument.
Not really. I think she just want to make sure that she reply to the correct question. Okay. So I think this is part of the culture in American classroom, that you have to be direct about your saying. You don't have to be actually give the background or anything. What is ever come up to your mind, to speak it out. That should be fine.
Okay. So another definition, it seems, for critical thinking is the idea of problem solving. So what you were saying is that back to this idea of soft skills, that the final exam is not always the complete or assessment. And so we've talked about if problem solving or critical thinking includes being able to analyze and evaluate your teachers and other people's information, textbook information, being able to criticize
people idea
in a direct way,
mm-hmm.
in a polite but direct way, and also being able to come up with some new ideas.
Right.
And that sounds like a big job. I mean,
that of course a big job for the international student, you know, who haven't actually being able to be critical when they was in their home country. Mm-hmm. But I do think I do agree like you would have to actually come up with the new idea and also be able to solve the problem by yourself at the same time, you know. So for example, if you don't understand anything, you would just have to go and read extra material by yourself. Or if you still don't understand, you need to go into your classmate and ask them, or the best way is probably to go to the professor themselves, because they have the office hour that you can actually work with them and they can help you a lot with that.
Okay, well that's good. It leads into the next question, which is this idea of university expectations. I mean, every country has its own culture, and universities have their own cultures.
Yeah.
Cambodian, American, Canadian universities.
Right.
It sounds like you're talking about that there's an unstated rule that you're supposed to be an independent learner.
Right. I guess that might be more true in the North American university, because I think independent learning is just so important in here in America and Canada. For example, like when you read the material, you need to be able to analyze all those ideas by yourselves, and especially in the classroom. You know, you won't expect the teacher to talk much about the content in the classroom, but instead you are expected to actually give up any thought about the content in the textbook. For example, things that you understand more, things that you understand beyond it, things that you can interpret it in a different way, or things that you don't understand, you actually speak it up. And for the first semester, I met one teacher. She was just so interesting because she would come to the classroom and explain nothing about the content. She would ask us, how would you feel about the textbook? Anything you understand, anything you don't understand. So that basically, I think for her class, we just came in and had a discussion. She didn't talk anything at all about the content in the book. Mm-hmm. But if you would ask her the question, she would answer that. So if you want her to talk about anything in the textbook, you need to be able to do that by yourself. So I think she probably is the person that put the most value on independent learning I've ever seen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this unstated rule that you're supposed to interpret information, you're not, and that the professor's not just going to give it back to you exactly as it is in the book.
But normally, I think normally the student would actually expect teacher to say something about the book, but she would just never say anything.
Students where?
I don't know how about, I haven't talked about it to my American friend, but international students do expect that. Do expect the professor to talk at least something about the content in the book. Okay. You know.
So that's really different.
Yeah.
So possibly the American or Canadian classmates would not be so surprised.
Yeah, I would imagine that Canadian teacher might probably be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that. So we've come to the end. In conclusion, this is June 2009. You've been through graduate school for a year.
Yeah.
And so, what do you think? Has it been worth it for you?
I think it's been really worthwhile coming to America and see all these differences. But I would say that we have differences between my country and America. But I won't say one of these is necessarily better than the other. You know, for example, in Cambodia, things are more formal, more accurate in terms of scoring students, which is better in terms of standardization too. But Americans are also good at put the graduate student at ease. No pressure on them. But overall, I could suggest that for those who like to come to America or Canada for their education, for their postgraduate education, as well as a teacher, I think it's better to actually do these three things. For one thing is they need to be able to actually speak out their mind, be direct about what they're saying. Don't be just too careful about what they're saying, because just whatever's coming to the mind, just speak it out. It doesn't matter in here. Nobody's gonna care about it. The second point is just being able to be critical, which means you need to evaluate people.